You're listening to Trek FM.
Hello and welcome to From There to Here, Trek FM's 50th anniversary rewatch of all 729 Star Trek adventures, from Broken Bow, Oklahoma, all the way to Yorktown Base and Star Trek Beyond. I'm one of your hosts for today, Lee Hutchison, and I'm joined by Stage 9's Mike Schindler.
Hey, how's it going?
Yeah, not too bad. I'm ready to kickstart Season 5 of Voyager. How about you?
Yeah, I'm ready. Let's do this.
Yeah, so do you want to give people a wee introduction into Night?
Sure. Night is the first episode of Season 5 in which the crew has been going through a void in space for a couple months where there's nothing, no stars or anything. And it looks like they're going to be going through this for a couple more years. And they're all really, really bored. And Janeway has become super distant and won't leave her quarters. And the crew is having trouble coping. And then something weird happens. And now there's weird space aliens, night aliens, who are invading the ship, and there are other aliens who are dumping like antimatter waste or whatever it is, who are trying to kill these guys and helping out Voyager. And wait, what's going on? Who's on whose side, and who wants to do what, and how are we going to get out of this void? Or are the next 2 seasons of Voyager just going to be really freaking boring? And then hijinks ensue. So what did you think about Night?
I think it's a pretty underrated episode in a lot of ways. I mean, firstly, when I went to see Star Trek Beyond earlier this year, I couldn't help but think of the parallels between this and Night. The idea of a ship just going through space, the captain becoming kind of tired, insular. And I really felt like there was some interesting parallels. I think there's a good double bill to be had between Night and Star Trek Beyond about kind of what it's like to be a captain in deep space, and how you can lose sight of your mission and reflect on where things have gone well and haven't. And I think it's a pretty underrated episode in terms of the character development, and I think this shows again, as some like 1 or 2 episodes a year of Voyager do, of this is what Voyager should be like, that they're dealing with being out there all alone, they're having to conserve energy, there's boredom, there's tension between the characters, there's character growth in Janeway, and too often these sorts of things just happen in isolation, whereas I think the stuff that goes on with Janeway, where she's reflecting on her decisions, is really interesting and long overdue, but it can be frustrating because you think, well, why hasn't this been kind of touched on before? That for about 5 years it's never really been referred to. And I know she says, oh, I've been kind of outrunning everything for so long and now it's all catching up, but it feels like it's just a bit of character, kind of a character episode as opposed to character growth, that it comes up, it's talked about, never happens again. And what lets this episode down, I think, is that element, but also the Malons. It's once again the Star Trek flaw of let's introduce aliens and then we base every time we see these aliens on what their kind of one thing they do is, whether it's the Klingons, they're warriors, the Romulans, they're duplicitous, the Malons, they just love getting rid of rubbish. It's kind of like basing Earth on meeting a bunch of junkyard men. It's a bit ridiculous.
Yeah, that is true. On the whole, I do like this episode a lot as well. I think that it is a good season premiere in that it kind of like is able to skip over a couple months, which is weird. I mean, like, why couldn't they do this in the middle of a season? They could. There's no reason not to. There's no like real world correlation to time. But you know, I mean, whatever. We've been gone for a couple months, so I guess you know it makes sense that they've been gone for a couple months as well, and you know, seeing where they're at again, kind of like yesterday with Image in the Sand, is cool. Although you know, it's not a direct sequel to you know the last episode or anything like that. It is, you know, sort of cool to see where they're at here, and it really does give them time to sort of reflect and delve into the characters, like you're saying, you know, Janeway in particular, but I think all of the characters, you know, it's kind of interesting to see how they how they deal with the situation that they're in. And I think it is really kind of cool and badass when Janeway, gets out of her funk, once something happens and she's like, all right, now it's time to kick ass, So that's cool. I think that there's, they do this thing in Star Trek all the time where it's like, oh, these people hurt us. Oh, wait, maybe they're not really the bad guys in this situation. But it works pretty well. I'm not quite sure about this whole Prime Directive thing and, them saying like, we'll give you this technology to, dump your waste in a easy fashion or whatever, but whatever. It is what it is. I thought it was good. The one thing that thinking about it, since you do have time, right, and since you do character episodes which are not related to what's going on externally from the ship, like for example Extreme Risk, which we're going to see in a few weeks, like that's all about B'Elanna's relationship with herself, really, right? They bring in like an external thing, but like you could have told that story in the Void. It would have been kind of cool if they had done like sort of a Void arc where it's just about like, it would almost like force them to just focus on the characters for an episode or two, but I can see why they wouldn't do that. And I think it's pretty good. Also, I think, is this where we were introduced to Captain Proton?
This is correct, yeah. The first shot of season 5 is a black and white Earth. It's quite a striking image. Yeah.
The black and white thing, it's interesting because apparently in season 1 of Next Gen, when they were doing the big goodbye, yes, okay. I always get confused with what the real thing is, the long goodbye and the big sleep. A big goodbye. They had talked about making that black and white, and they opted not to because they thought it didn't really make any sense. But here, I guess they're just like, whatever, who cares if it doesn't make any sense, and they just made it black and white. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Yeah, like I don't mind the Captain Proton stuff. It's a bit silly, but I would probably be doing that sort of holodeck programs. That I don't think I'd be doing the Irish Village or the French Bar. I think I'd be doing like Captain Proton running around with my laser gun. I think it's a pretty cool holodeck program all in all.
Yeah, I'd say it's probably the best of all of the Voyager holodeck programs.
One thing, like, wrapping up, that I do quite like about this episode is the shots of Voyager in the dark, with like just seeing the ship illuminated by the lights. I think that looks pretty cool actually on the TV, and it's still one of those moments when you're so used to the usual shots of Voyager along a starscape, Voyager going to warp. Just seeing Voyager in a dark void is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's really cool. I like it a lot. Yeah.
So, Afterimage, do you want to give everyone a brief synopsis of this?
Sure. This is our, I guess, real, true, proper introduction to Ezri after all of the craziness of the 2-part season premiere in Deep Space Nine. Ezri is now aboard the station. She's a counselor, and she's having sort of a personal crisis in that she doesn't really think that she's suited to being a counselor. And, Garrick is freaking out with some claustrophobia due to some unknown reason, and she's trying to help him through that, but at the same time she's trying to help herself through her own issues. And I think it's 4 different guys on the station in one way or another are sort of romantically interested in Ezri, and she needs to deal with that. One of those guys being Worf, who is not too happy about his dead wife being aboard the station still in some capacity when he's trying to get over her. I can definitely see how that would be awkward. And we really get deep into what this character is. So what did you think about Afterimage?
I think it's a pretty underrated episode. That I think season 7 of Deep Space Nine, the kind of the first half before we really dive into the kind of the arc heavy stuff, is filled with these kind of standalone episodes in kind of Deep Space Nine terms. And I think what it deals with is quite interesting. I think the Ezri Worf thing is as believable as a situation where two aliens and one of them's got a slug in the belly, which is actually his ex-wife, his dead wife, and it's pretty bonkers, really, but it's like you believe it. And I can imagine Worf's hurt and frustration. I'm sure I'd probably be in the same boat, that, you know, it's like when you break up in a relationship, you sometimes just need that clean sweep from someone. And I think it's really, you know, great acting from Worf, and Ezri's got this kind of cute, kind of a bit nonchalant attitude, and I think you look at that and you think, you know, nothing would upset her or say, you know, make her say boo to a goose, but you see it in her eyes, like the hurt she's got when she sees Worf, and that she's struggling to decide whether she should stay in Starfleet or not. I think it's really well played and well written, and I think the Garrick stuff is overlooked as well. I think the idea that he is suffering from this stress, that he is essentially decoding what is going to be leading to the death of his fellow comrades, people that he maybe knew, people that he worked alongside, or just general citizens that have been caught up in this war. And I can imagine how much of a difficult situation that must be in, and I certainly wouldn't envy him being in that the quickest way to end the war is probably to have so many of his fellow citizens die, and that's a tough road to be on.
Yeah, for sure. You know, I mean, like with the Worf stuff, like you could see anyone, you know, like you're saying, you know, feel the way that Worf feels, and definitely if I were in his shoes, I'd probably feel the same way. But it feels like Worf, more than anyone, would react the way that he does. You know, it would be hardest on him, especially since, you know, he just had that closure in the last episode with getting Jadzia to Sto-vo-kor and everything, and it's like, wait a minute, you know, we just said goodbye, and now she's back, and, you know, this is, you know, really, really hard. And then you've got everyone else on the station who's like, oh my God, you know, Ezri and Dax, and oh, you know, I mean, you've got Jake saying like, oh, look at how cute she is, and then you've got Bashir and Quark who are like, now is our chance again, you know, and that kind of thing. And it's just like, you know, Worf obviously isn't having any of that, but at the same time, is that his place? Not really. So it's creates some very interesting character dynamics all the way around, and I think that the character of Ezri is really cool, and it's interesting that they were able to do this with Dax, you know, and really sort of explore another side of Dax through Ezri. And I think it works pretty well. And like you're saying, the Garrick stuff is also really good. And you can see, I mean, he's such a tortured character, even though he's not willing to admit that ever. And I think that they do a good job showing his internal conflict, too.
And I think it's summed up so well that the kind of the difference between the Daxes, when Garrick kind of has his meltdown and she's like, Jadzia was he was a powerful person, you couldn't even stand anywhere close to how great a person she was, and he really just rips her to shreds. And you can imagine that's kind of probably things that people were probably saying, that Terry Farrell was such a loved actress, Jadzia was such a loved character, and then to have this, who is this person that's coming in the final season, who is this character? And you can imagine some of the things he's saying probably come off the old Trek BBS boards or whatever, and how much he puts down Ezri Dax, and those are the type of conclusions people would probably have come to at the time without any context, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, but, you know, I think Nicole DeBoer handled herself well and turned out a really great performance in this last season, and I think that the character really does add a lot to the show, you know? Yeah,
absolutely. She certainly mixes things up for the last season. There's no such thing as the status quo on Deep Space Nine. Yeah. So Mike, if people want to get in contact with you on the internet, how could people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Mumbles3K, and you can also hear me on Trek FM's Stage 9, where we talk about the people who make Star Trek.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Lee_Nostromo, and you'll find me maybe on Earl Grey by the time this episode comes out. So let us know what you thought of this episode. We'd love to hear your views. So yeah, join us tomorrow for Voyager's Drone, and take me out to the holosuite from Deep Space Nine.